Hello, you're watching Daybreak live on A News, and I'm here to take you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. Donald Trump says an Israel-Lebanon ceasefire will be extended by 3 weeks. US board ship carrying Iran oil as Trump threatens mine-laying vessels on the Strait of Hormuz. And EU leaders meet in Cyprus to discuss Ukraine, Iran and mutual defence. First, this morning, US President Donald Trump has announced the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon will be extended by another 3 weeks. The two sides met in Washington on Thursday to discuss peace efforts, after which Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform saying the meeting went very well and that the US will work with Lebanon in order to help it protect itself from Hezbollah. Let's take a closer look at that report.
US President Donald Trump said Israel and Lebanon have agreed to extend a ceasefire between Israel and the Hezbollah militant group by 3 weeks after talks at the White House on Thursday.
We had a great meeting with the very high officials of Lebanon and very high officials of Israel, and we think that the President of Lebanon and the Prime Minister of Israel over the next couple of weeks will be coming here. They've agreed to an additional 3 weeks of, no firing, ceasefire, no more firing. Let's see. We hope that happens. It's not going to happen between them, but they do have Hezbollah to think about.
His announcement came during a second round of US-facilitated talks in the Oval Office, with Israel's ambassador to Washington, Yehiel Leiter, and Lebanon's ambassador to the US, Nada Hamader Moawad. The ceasefire has led to a significant drop in violence. The announcement came a day after Israeli strikes killed at least 5 people, including a journalist. Hezbollah, which is not controlled by the Lebanese armed forces, has not immediately commented on the ceasefire. Meanwhile, moments after the ceasefire was announced, Israel struck a Hezbollah missile launcher. The Israeli army released footage showing what it said was strikes on rocket launchers at a Hezbollah military site in southern Lebanon.
Now let's take a look at the stories shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to the New York Times website, also staying with our top story. Trump says Iran, Israel and Lebanon agree to extend ceasefire. So on that report that you just sort of heard, Donald Trump has announced this extension of the ceasefire by 3 more weeks, even though Hezbollah was not, or any representatives were not there at the time and did not immediately comment on the announcement. Now, the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of Lebanon did not state anything either during that time. Now, a durable peace would hinge upon the ability of Lebanon's government to rein in on Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran. On Iran negotiations, though, between the US and Iran, reporters in the Oval Office said that Trump said that he doesn't want to be rushed in regards to making a deal with Iran, and has actually ordered the US military to shoot and kill small Iranian boats that deploy mines in the Strait of Hormuz, stating that the US had complete control over the strait, which is the key waterway that governs at least 20% of its energy supplies, particularly oil, during that waterway. Now, Israel's defense minister says that they are also prepared to renew the war with Iran if the US gives the green light, and threatens to return Iran to its dark and stone ages. Now, adding to this, US forces have actually boarded a ship carrying Iranian oil in the Indian Ocean, and Trump says that it's something that they are making sure to put pressure on Iran in order to come to the table and sort out a deal. Due to this, oil prices have gone above $100 a barrel, igniting fears of ongoing inflation that could dent the economy, the global economy in that regards. Now let's turn to the next story that's on Reuters, and that's in relation to Cuba. Cuba sees short-term relief as Russian oil begins to flow. So Cubans this week began to reap the benefits of a recent shipment of 100,000 metric tons of oil delivery of Russian oil. That's roughly 40 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Now, it's a temporary lifeline for the Caribbean island who's been starved of energy over the past 3, coming up to 4 months since the US cut off its fuel supply in January after the capturing of Venezuela's President Maduro. Now, many Cubans have expressed relief this week as blackouts have fallen dramatically in some areas following nearly 4 months of no fuel. Now, one citizen has actually stated how important that it's been, and Putin's boat has improved the situation and they're thankful for that. And Russia's embassy in Cuba also celebrated the fuel's arrival with a hooray on social media as well. Now let's go to our next story, and that's on Deutsche Welle's website, and that's in relation to what is taking place. The ICC says Philippines Duterte to face trial over drugs. Now a 3-judge panel at the International Criminal Court on Thursday confirmed that the former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte can stand on trial for charges against crimes against humanity. Now, these charges relate to his alleged role in overseeing a deadly anti-drug crackdown while serving as president between 2016 to 2022. The panel said there was substantial grounds to support charges that Duterte was responsible for dozens of murders, first as a mayor when he was serving there, and then later when he was a president. Now, the Hague-based court said that the evidence against him is enough to proceed to a trial, and a date is yet to be determined. Now, human rights groups estimate 30,000 people were killed during Duarte's 6 years in office. The National Police have also reported 6,000 deaths as well, and suspects were often executed without trial. Okay, now let's go to our next story, and that is in regards to Eurovision on The Guardian. Slovenia to air films about Palestine instead of Eurovision Song Contest. So national broadcasters in Ireland, Spain and Slovenia will no longer air the Eurovision Song Contest this year after deciding to boycott it because of Israel's participation. They announced individually that it would not submit any national entry. Slovenian broadcaster RTV confirmed on Thursday that it would actually implement a broadcasting blackout of the world's largest music event and show a series of films about Palestine instead. They actually quoted this and said, "We will not be broadcasting Eurovision Song Contest." That's what the RTV Slovenia's director told Associated Press. Now, Spain's RTVE reiterated this particular decision not to air Eurovision last week, and that will actually mark its first time since the country started participating in the song contest in 1961. Now, Ireland's public broadcaster RTE announced last December it would neither broadcast nor participate in the event. A number of other countries include the Netherlands and Iceland, who walked out of the event last December, but the contest will be shown on their individual national broadcasters. So this year's competition will be the 70th anniversary, and 35 countries are currently competing in that and will be taking place in Vienna, which is Austria's capital, next month. But it's very interesting as to the number of countries that have decided no longer to be a part of the Eurovision Song Contest this year. Okay, now that's your press roundup for now. Now I'll take a short break and come back to you with the rest of the global stories. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's take a look at the rest of the global stories this morning. Tensions in the Strait of Hormuz are escalating as both the US and Iran seize commercial vessels at sea. On Thursday, US President Donald Trump told reporters at the White House America will not use nuclear weapons against Iran amid rising military and economic pressure.
US President Donald Trump has reiterated claims that Washington has total control over the Strait of Hormuz as tensions with Iran continue to escalate. Speaking on Thursday, Trump said the United States was enforcing an airtight blockade and could reopen the strait at its discretion, but added he was deliberately keeping it closed to increase pressure on Tehran. He also said Washington would not use nuclear weapons against Iran.
Why would I use a nuclear weapon We've totally, in a very conventional way, decimated them without it. No, I wouldn't use it. A nuclear weapon should never be allowed to be used by anybody.
At the same time, incidents at sea underscore ongoing challenges on both sides. Iranian forces have seized 2 commercial vessels using fast boats, highlighting their continued operational presence. Meanwhile, US forces boarded a stateless tanker, the Majestic X, in the Indian Ocean, which the Pentagon said was carrying Iranian oil. The situation has led to parallel efforts to restrict maritime traffic, keeping oil prices near $100 a barrel and raising supply concerns. Despite US claims that Iran's conventional forces have been weakened, analysts say it still retains fast boats, drones and mines capable of disrupting shipping. The Strait of Hormuz remains a vital route for global energy flows, and continued disruptions carry broader economic risks. Diplomatic efforts have yet to yield a breakthrough, with both sides maintaining pressure while signalling openness to negotiations.
Pope Leo XIV has condemned violence in Iran, calling for an end to the killing of civilians and renewed efforts toward dialogue and peace. Speaking aboard a flight back to Rome, he warned that ongoing tensions between Iran and the United States are fueling a wider humanitarian and economic crisis. Here's what he had to say.
I condemn all actions that are unjust. I condemn the taking of people's lives. I condemn capital punishment. I believe that human life is to be respected and that all people from conception to natural birth, their lives should be respected and protected. So when a regime, when a country takes decisions which takes away the lives of other people unjustly, then obviously that is something that should be condemned.
EU leaders have used their Cyprus meeting to send a strong signal of support to Ukraine. The bloc approved a major financial package and reaffirmed political backing for Kyiv. Here's more.
European Union leaders gathered in Cyprus on Thursday for an informal 2-day summit focused on Ukraine, the Middle East and EU finances. On the sidelines, the EU formally approved a €90 billion loan package for Ukraine, alongside new sanctions on Russia. The funding is expected to cover about 2/3 of Ukraine's financial needs over the next 2 years. Economists had warned Kyiv could run out of money by June without this support.
We have a strong and fundamental decision, and it's a decision of all the leaders, of the unanimity of EU. We are very thankful. The great progress today, 90 billion support package and sanctions package, which is also a great signal. And we will work to make sure the funds are delivered as soon as possible. For us it's important, and this will strengthen, of course, first of all, our army, Ukrainian forces, and allow us to boost production by air defense and work more to protect our energy system for the winter.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen confirmed the EU had delivered on its promise during talks in Ayia Napa.
Most of the preparatory work has already been done to implement the €90 billion loan. I think that it is possible to have the first tranche of the 45 billion that are assigned for the year 2026 still this quarter. We have agreed on 1/3 of the loan goes to budgetary means and 2/3 of the loan go into defense. And I think the first package will be a drones package, drones from Ukraine for Ukraine.
Zelensky added that Ukraine is ready to move forward with EU accession talks, saying both sides are prepared to open negotiation clusters. Leaders will continue discussions on Friday, including talks with regional partners on the Middle East and energy security. No formal decisions are expected from the summit itself.
US President Donald Trump has responded to comments by Britain's Prince Harry, urging stronger efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Speaking at the White House, Trump said Harry does not speak for the UK and reiterated his focus on relations with King Charles ahead of his upcoming state visit.
Prince Harry?
Yes, sir.
How's he doing? How's his wife? Please give her my regards, okay? No, I don't know. I know one thing. Prince Harry is not speaking for the UK, that's for sure. I think I'm speaking for the UK more than Prince Harry, but I appreciate his advice very much.
Would you have
Great
invited
advice.
him to the
Staying on the UK, King Charles is set to visit the United States next week in what is being described as one of the most important trips of his reign so far. King Charles and Queen Camilla are expected to arrive on Monday, where he will address a joint meeting of Congress and meet privately with US President Donald Trump. The state visit comes at a time of growing strain between the two long-standing allies and is aimed at reinforcing the so-called special relationship between the UK and the US. US President Donald Trump has threatened the UK, though, with tariffs over its digital service tax impacting US firms. Many countries, particularly in Europe, have levied taxes on the sales revenue of digital providers, including Alphabet's Google, Meta's Facebook, and Apple and Amazon.
We don't like it when they target American companies, because basically you're talking about our great American companies. And whether we like those companies or don't like them, they're American companies, and they're the top companies in the world. We can meet that very easily by just putting a big tariff on the UK, so they better be careful. If they don't drop the tax, we'll probably put a big tariff on the UK.
Now staying with the US, and at least one person has died and 6 others remain injured following a shooting at a shopping center in Louisiana on Thursday. Authorities say the incident began after an argument in the food court when 2 groups opened fire on each other. 5 people have been arrested in connection with the shooting, and officials say those injured have been taken to a medical facility. It marks the second fatal mass shooting in Louisiana this week, following a separate incident on Sunday in which 7 children were killed. Turning to the world of digital, and Meta Platforms plans to cut 8,000 jobs, roughly 10% of its workforce, in May as it shifts its focus to AI. The company informed employees in a Thursday memo, which also said around 6,000 open roles will be closed. Other tech giants include Amazon, Snap and Block are also cutting jobs, with layoffs reaching 52,000 in the first quarter. A new Reuters Ipsos poll shows Americans remain sharply divided over trust in elections as the country prepares for upcoming midterm votes in November.
A new Reuters and Ipsos poll highlights growing divisions among Americans over trust in elections as the country heads toward midterm votes. The survey shows a sharp partisan split, particularly among Republicans and Democrats. According to the poll, 63% of Republicans believe the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump, despite a lack of evidence supporting that claim. Overall, 46% of respondents said they believe there are large numbers of fraudulent ballots cast by non-citizens, with support for that view much higher among Republicans. At the same time, 53% of Americans said they are concerned about mail-in or absentee ballot fraud, again reflecting strong political divisions. The findings suggest that years of messaging questioning election integrity have had a lasting impact on public perception. Despite this, confidence in the system remains relatively strong. A majority of Americans say they still trust that their own vote will be counted correctly. The poll also shows broad support for voter identification requirements. Around 77% of respondents back mandatory ID checks at polling stations, including majorities from both major political parties. However, there is limited support for more extreme measures. Only 28% of Americans support deploying troops to polling stations, according to the survey. The poll, conducted among more than 4,500 adults across the United States, highlights how deeply divided public opinion remains as the country prepares for its next electoral test.
Over to Latin America, and following a mass trial that began on Tuesday, hundreds of alleged MS-13 gang leaders attended a virtual hearing in El Salvador. This comes as authorities warn of maximum penalties for those found guilty.
Hundreds of alleged gang leaders sat before television screens inside El Salvador's Socot mega prison on Thursday as a mass virtual trial got underway. The proceedings mark one of the largest mass trials under President Nayib Bukele's crackdown on gang violence through controversial emergency powers. A Salvadoran court has begun trying more than 486 alleged leaders of the Mara Salvatrucha gang, also known as MS-13, in a case involving over 47,000 crimes prosecutors say were committed between 2012 and 2022. United Nations experts have criticised the use of mass trials, saying they undermine the right to defence and the presumption of innocence. Officials, however, say the system in place can ensure due process for each defendant.
The subjects here are those historic gang leaders, leaders of gang cells, gang spokesmen, individuals who for many years caused mourning and pain to our society. Within our infrastructure, we have a series of hearing rooms that allow us to develop remote connectivity without any problem, and thus facilitate guaranteeing due process to each of the accused in this hearing.
Charges include homicide, feminicide, arms trafficking and rebellion, with prosecutors alleging the defendants sought to establish a parallel state through territorial control. The Attorney General's office said it has compelling evidence that could lead to maximum penalties for those found guilty. MS-13, a transnational gang designated as a terrorist organization by the United States last year, was founded in Los Angeles in the 1980s by immigrants who had fled El Salvador's civil war, but now has a larger presence in Central America.
A surge in demand for high-protein-rich foods is offering a lifeline to American farmers as low crop prices and rising fertilizer and fuel costs have put added pressure on the sector. Let's take a look at that report.
Across parts of the US, farmers are turning to crops like peas and lentils as demand for protein-rich foods continues to grow. For many, these pulses are becoming a more reliable option. They are cheaper to grow and require fewer inputs at a time when costs remain high. The wider farm economy has been under pressure for years. Low grain prices, tariffs linked to trade disputes, and rising costs for fertilizer and fuel have all squeezed margins. For some farmers, crops like wheat are no longer profitable. Pulses, however, offer a different path. They not only reduce input costs, but also help improve soil health, making them an increasingly attractive choice. At the same time, demand is picking up. Protein is now being added to everything from cereals to snacks and drinks, driven by shifting diets and strong consumer interest. Still, some experts caution that the protein trend may be overstated, noting that most people already get enough in their daily diets. Even so, for farmers navigating a difficult market, pulses are providing a rare point of stability, and in some cases, a way to stay profitable.
Over to a quick break now. When I return, I'll have an update of the regional headlines and the key stories taking place across this particular region, followed by a guest. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now let's go to the stories in the region. And first we head to Turkey and the United Kingdom because the two countries have signed a strategic partnership framework document during Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan's two-day visit. The framework aims to deepen UK-Turkey cooperation across a wide range of areas, including global security, NATO coordination, defence and industry collaboration, amongst others. It also expanded on the joint work on climate change, energy security and partnerships in science, tech and innovation. Azerbaijan has joined the United Nations Convention on International Settlement Agreements. Permanent representative of the Republic of Azerbaijan to the United Nations, Tevfik Musayev, signed the UN Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation, also known as the Singapore Convention on Mediation. It is reported that the convention adopted in New York on December 2018. Now to Armenia, and it says recent diplomatic progress and shifting regional dynamics are helping it manage growing pressure on its energy sector. Speaking at the Delphi Economic Forum in Greece, Armenia's Security Council Secretary says cooperation with Azerbaijan had contributed to its stability.
Armenia's Security Council Secretary Armen Grigorian says a peace process with Azerbaijan has strengthened the country's ability to respond to regional challenges. Speaking at the Delphi Economic Forum in Greece, he pointed to the Washington Declaration and a draft peace agreement with Azerbaijan as key developments. He said ongoing conflicts, including the war in Ukraine and tensions in the Middle East, continue to affect the region. Grigorian noted that the situation around Iran and disruptions such as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz have had a direct impact on energy markets. Despite this, he said fuel prices in Armenia have remained relatively stable. According to Grigorian, this is partly linked to economic cooperation with Azerbaijan, including fuel imports that have helped ease pressure on the market. Armenia has traditionally relied on Russia and Iran for energy supplies. However, the war in Ukraine, strikes on Russian energy infrastructure, and rising domestic demand in Russia have created supply challenges. At the same time, sanctions and restrictions affecting Iran have added further uncertainty. These factors have increased concerns about energy supply risks for Armenia. Similar challenges are also seen in neighbouring Georgia. Grigorian said that cooperation with Azerbaijan has contributed to maintaining relative stability in Armenia's energy market. He added that while global price increases have had an impact, fuel costs have broadly returned to levels seen late last year. However, some sectors, including agriculture, continue to feel the pressure. The government has introduced subsidies to support farmers facing higher costs.
Staying closely on this topic and Armenia's crucial parliamentary elections in June, Azerbaijan and Armenia peace process assumes heightened significance. And here to further discuss that significance is Terrell Ganjali, Member of Parliament from Khandy City. Welcome to the programme this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Well, we just saw in that report just some of the outlines of how key and how crucial the peace process is with Armenia and Azerbaijan, and that's kind of what I want to go into more detail today. Now, because Armenia seems to be entering into the late April pre-election period right now, comparatively stable, under stable conditions as well, how significant is stability in political terms for Armenia?
Yeah, stability in political terms in Armenia is very essential for Armenia because as you have mentioned, Armenia enters into a pre-election period. That's why it's important for Armenia to have stable political economic situation in order to conduct the elections and overall to pursue further the political positive atmosphere, especially a peace process with Azerbaijan, because you know that last August in summer we initialed a peace draft treaty with Armenia, and hopefully after the successful conducting of elections in Armenia, I hope that the new Armenian government will be able to finally sign peace treaty. But before that, of course, the political and economic cooperation with Azerbaijan significantly helped Armenia to stabilize its political situation, especially the economic situation, because of the wars in the north and in the tensions in the Middle East. We are suffering significantly from the results, from the consequences of these conflicts around our geography. And Azerbaijan has been first to lift the restrictions upon Armenia, and of course with the help of Azerbaijan, Armenia received gasoline products, grain products, not only from Azerbaijan, also from Russia, and it significantly helped Armenia to diversify its also policy, because being dependent only from Russia, speaking in terms of Armenia, being dependent only from Russia significantly creates obstacles for Armenian economy. Now we are seeing the emergence of a new situation. Development of the cooperation with Azerbaijan, of course, again significantly assists Armenian economy and stabilizes the political situation.
And does the existence of the functioning peace framework enhance Armenia's resilience from external pressures, as you just mentioned, in relation to Russia?
Yes, exactly. Having a positive peace agenda enhances and helps Armenia to withstand these political challenges, because since this time, Armenia had a very heavy burden on its shoulders because of the war, because of the aggression against Azerbaijan. It's obvious fact that since independent Republic of Armenia was established, all the resources, all the financial funds have been directed to build up military of Armenia. But now, finally, we are seeing the opportunity, the results that Armenia can also diversify its economy, not only investing on the military, but also helping people, to diversify the energy sector, cooperating with Azerbaijan. By the way, with the opening of the borders, this situation will be significantly developed, because of the open borders means open trade turnover. The volume of the trade turnover between Azerbaijan and Armenia will be increased. Also, at the same time, the parallel situation with Turkey. We know that because of the war, Turkey also closed its borders. And finally, when we sign the peace treaty, when diplomatic relations established, when we will reciprocally establish embassies in Armenia and Azerbaijan, of course, Turkey also will join the process, and overall it will help the South Caucasus.
And Armin Grigoryan emphasizes on the institutionalization of peace, introducing a quite a key dimensional concept in relation to that. What exactly does that mean in relation to Azerbaijan and Armenia's context?
Institutionalizing peace means removing all the obstacles, removing all the problems, and remaining, these difficulties from the agenda of our relations. First of all, we need to overcome the situation where unfortunately, yes, there is a fact, there is a structure of the remaining, problems left from conflict period. We need, first of all, to remove the obstacles. The main obstacle is of course, opening of the transit and communication links. First of all, Zengezur. By the way, it is not coincidence that Armenia is now discussing to elevating its standards, air flight standards into the European standard, because of, for many years, Armenia has been isolated because of its policy. Now we have, when we speak about the institutionalizing of peace process, it means that establishing relations, building embassy, opening embassy buildings, and helping people also on the ground. But for Azerbaijan, it means, for example, helping the former IDPs to return back to their homes in dignity and in security. For Armenia also, it means that to heal the problems, the consequences of the war, because of 30 years of confrontation with Azerbaijan, not only destroyed Armenian economy, Armenia's ability to develop, but also negatively affected all the South Caucasus region.
Yes, and with Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan framing the elections as a choice between peace and renewed conflict, to what extent is the peace process itself becoming a central electoral issue?
I think that the most important element, the most important aspect of the pre-election campaign of Pashinyan is to introduce peace, because Armenian people have suffered mainly because of the conflict, because of the economy is collapsed, because low life standards, living standards in Armenia. Everything is related to the conflict, everything related to the economic situation because of the conflict with Azerbaijan. Now Pashinyan comes up and says that, okay, look, we have a new opportunity. If we establish peace with Azerbaijan, Armenia will be able to develop faster than anyone expected. That's why it's naturally that our Pashinyan is putting forward the peace agenda, the signing of peace treaty with Azerbaijan, first of all in its pre-election campaign. I think that it's a good, actually, good plan to introduce your election campaign, first of all introducing peace with Azerbaijan.
And do you think that will influence voter behavior then?
I think that, yeah, most of all Armenian population would like to see peace. Yes, it is obvious that we have some revanchist groups, we have some radicals in Armenian society who are against peace process with Azerbaijan, but the result we have obvious. Because of the 30 years of conflict, the most important party, the most important side that suffered from the conflict is Armenia. And now Azerbaijan, we have resources, now we are recovering fast, we have, you know, political will, we have also the relations, our allies are helping Azerbaijan. And that's why it's also very important to Armenia, in order to diversify its political geostrategic vision, Armenia needs Azerbaijan. And also, of course, Azerbaijan also needs Armenia. Armenia is surrounded by countries with whom he created problems when Soviet Union collapsed. Now it's time that it's above time that we remove these obstacles and proceed further to peace process.
And with that, to what extent now can the trip, obviously the trip corridor route that Trump is very much involved in the US has kind of come in to make sure it's transforming this particular South Caucasus area. So how could that transform the process from a political agreement into a framework of economic interdependence?
Yeah, very good question. The trip corridor, you know that we signed joint declaration last year with the US endorsement that trip corridor will be opened and it will contribute significantly to a peace process. And, you know, yes, it is fact is obvious that now US is involved in Middle East. Now US also has its stakes in war between Russia and Ukraine. But nevertheless, despite what happens in the different parts of the world, Zangezur corridor will be opened, because when we had Zangezur corridor functioning 150 years ago, there was no US policy in the South Caucasus, there was no European Union interest or anything like this. That's why it's important that Armenia and Azerbaijan come together, and putting aside all the geostrategic, geo-economic problems that we have in the world, we have to work together to open this corridor, and it will also end Armenia's isolationist policy in the South Caucasus. That's why, you know, Armenia's engagement with Georgia, Armenian opening of new embassy in Kazakhstan, Armenia's willingness to work with Turkey means that Armenia is now significantly diversifying its foreign policy. Armenia does not want to be dependent only from Russia or only from European Union. It's better for them, it's better for everybody, win-win situation, as we call it in international relations theories.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining me and for explaining that this morning, Mr. Ganjali. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, industry figures and energy professionals have come to Baku for a forum focused on oil trading and logistics across the Caspian and Central Asia, discussing the future of regional trade and transport routes. A news correspondent sent us this from the event.
Hello from Baku, Azerbaijan, where the second annual Caspian and Central Asia Oil Trading and Logistics Forum is bringing together 150 senior energy leaders from across Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Central Asia, the Middle East, and more. More than 20 expert speakers are also taking the stage across the sessions, shaping discussions on the future of regional energy trade. Major oil companies like SOCAR, Shell, and Petronas are among those taking part, alongside the traders, transport operators, and financial institutions. So the focus here is on practicality, especially given the latest developments and existing tensions in the Middle East. Discussions are looking at oil reserves across the region, the impact of geopolitics and supplies, and how disruptions from the Middle East to the Red Sea are reshaping global energy.
The forum began with a showcase of traditional Azerbaijani cultural dance, offering delegates a warm local welcome before discussions got underway. Day one features 3 key sessions, starting with oil reserves, geopolitics and supply disruptions, and how countries like Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan are positioning themselves amid shifting global demand.
It wasn't just a panel talking, and what the panel put forward was all very relevant to the conversation of different oil supplies from different parts of the world, with the current problem that we have with the Strait of Hormuz, and the effect of it at the end. 1,200% rise in the price of liquid natural gas.
I have quite a background in this region in terms of transportation and trading of oil, and I think it's very relevant here to be discussing how to improve and how to optimize the flow in this very important region.
The second session focuses on trading, blending and refining, looking at how companies are managing volatile prices, competition from Asia's refining hubs, and the need for stronger risk management.
And as we are here on the ground, we have been speaking to key representatives and hearing their views firsthand on the future of energy moving forward.
So today, the Kazakh delegation is taking part in an important event. This event is dedicated to the oil and gas logistics, and definitely since Kazakhstan is a neighbor to Azerbaijan, and taking into account that geopolitical situation is shifting, we see that different wars, conflicts are affecting on a landlocked country as Kazakhstan. That's why boosting cooperation in the oil and gas sector with Azerbaijan is a primary goal.
We hope to build relationships and start proper trading. We are a trading house. You can say we're a small company trading in the East African, Red Sea and Indian subcontinent region, and we want to expand our trading activities and even our investment portfolio. And the region here is very promising with opportunities.
Well, I think it's really important because coming from Pakistan, we have a lot of very close ties with the countries that are represented here, particularly Azerbaijan. We have very long and close ties, as well as with some of the other countries as well. And I think that there is a huge opportunity for all of these countries to look at Pakistan as a destination market as well as a transit market for their oil and gas.
The final session examines alternative supply routes, including new pipeline proposals and infrastructure challenges in the Caspian Sea, as the region seeks more stable export routes. The forum will continue into day 2, with further discussions expected on the future of energy trade.
In my view, shows
Kazakhstan and Turkey have agreed to allow military transit through their airspaces, a move set to boost mobility for both nations. Fariza Kalimazana has more.
Kazakhstan's Senate has ratified an agreement with Turkey allowing military personnel and equipment to transit through the airspace of both countries. The deal creates a clear framework for using each other's air corridors, including for deployments linked to UN peacekeeping missions. For Kazakhstan, this means more direct and practical routes, especially through Turkey, which connects Europe, the Middle East and Asia. The process will be strictly regulated. each flight will require prior approval from the relevant authorities requested in advance through diplomatic channels. Annual permits will apply only to military transport aircraft. A single diplomatic clearance number can also be used for other purposes, including humanitarian aid, official delegations and training activities. Both countries keep the right to refuse or cancel any request if the rules are not followed. This is important for Kazakhstan, where national law generally does not allow the transit of foreign military forces and equipment unless it's covered by international agreements. As regional dynamics continue to shift, the agreement is expected to make coordination easier and improve mobility, particularly during joint exercises and peacekeeping operations. However, officials have not said what specific operations or needs led to the signing of this agreement. Fariza Kalimursana, Almaty, A News.
It's time for a quick break now, but when I return, I'll have the latest updates of the key stories this morning, plus a look at what's making the front pages. Don't go anywhere. Hello, you're watching Daybreak live on A News, and if you're just joining me, I'm your host Nadia Jani, here to take you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. Donald Trump says an Israel-Lebanon ceasefire will be extended by 3 extra weeks. US boards ship carrying Iran oil as Trump threatens mine-lying vessels on the Strait of Hormuz. And EU leaders meet in Cyprus to discuss Ukraine, Iran and mutual defence. Now let's take a look at the stories making the front page this morning. And we head first to CNN's website, where the headline here is US Special Forces soldier arrested after allegedly winning $400,000 on Maduro raid. Now, what is this story about? So a US Army Special Forces soldier who helped to capture Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela has been charged with using classified information to bet on the mission on a prediction marketplace. Now, the soldier, who was called Master Sergeant Gannon Ken Van Dyke, made more than $400,000 by betting on different scenarios after learning of the operation. Now, Sergeant Van Dyke tried to hide his use of classified information in order to make money. That's according to reports and investigations. Now, the indictment represents one of the highest profile episodes of a US government employee using classified information to make money on prediction markets, which is actually a threat to national security that has led the White House to warn its staff to avoid such insider trading. The warning has come because of a surge of suspicious trading related to the war in Iran. Any extra further information we get around this particular story will definitely keep you updated. But that is quite a high profile soldier who's now being investigated for this type of activity. Now let's turn to our next story, and that's actually on Reuters, and that's in relation to what's going on in Cuba. Cuba now sees short-term relief as Russian oil begins to flow. Just a reminder, Cuba hasn't received any oil because its main supplier was Venezuela, which the US decided to stop in order to pressurize the government to do what it wanted in that particular area. But now 100,000 tons of metric tons delivered by Russia has now reached the country. That's roughly 40 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So it's a lot, but it's only a temporary lifeline for the energy-starved nation. And it's a major shipment of oil for them to receive since the US cut off its fuel earlier in the year. Now, many Cubans have expressed relief and gratitude for Russia's oil coming to them, and it's also impacted a less fallout in relation to the global blackouts that were happening. So that's now a lot less, which is helping citizens there dramatically because of the blackouts, which made a lot of things a lot more difficult for many of the citizens in Cuba. And also the Russian embassy in Cuba also celebrated the fuel arrival by writing on social media saying hooray and showing video footage of it arriving in Havana last night. Well, that was that. Let's turn to our next story, which is the main headline throughout the whole of today and this week. That's on the New York Times website, and it says Trump says Israel and Lebanon agree to extend ceasefire. So this came out of talks between delegations between Israel and Lebanon on Thursday, and Trump actually announced this yesterday evening in relation to a ceasefire being extended, saying that they want to make sure that talks continue and that nothing more happens in relation to more strikes from either side. Now, the Prime Minister of Israel wasn't there, did not comment. Neither did the Lebanon side either, and Hezbollah has not been invited to any of these talks, which is the actual ones who are on ground fighting with Israel. Now, a durable peace would hinge on the ability for Lebanon's government to rein in on Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran, which is what the main issue is, just because Hezbollah is its own entity within Lebanon. But these negotiations are still ongoing, and Trump is trying to make sure that there is some form of deal taking place. But when Trump was asked whether or not what's going on with Iran in relation to a deal, he actually said to one of the reporters he doesn't want to rush himself when it comes to making a deal with Iran. But now let's go to our report, which has more information in regards to this extended ceasefire taking place.
US President Donald Trump said Israel and Lebanon have agreed to extend a ceasefire between Israel and the Hezbollah militant group by 3 weeks after talks at the White House on Thursday.
We had a great meeting with the very high officials of Lebanon and very high officials of Israel, and we think that the President of Lebanon and the Prime Minister of Israel over the next couple of weeks will be coming here. They've agreed to an additional 3 weeks of, no firing, ceasefire, no more firing. Let's see. We hope that happens. It's not going to happen between them, but they do have Hezbollah to think about.
His announcement came during a second round of US-facilitated talks in the Oval Office, with Israel's ambassador to Washington, Yehiel Leiter, and Lebanon's ambassador to the US, Nada Hamader Moawad. The ceasefire has led to a significant drop in violence. The announcement came a day after Israeli strikes killed at least 5 people, including a journalist. Hezbollah, which is not controlled by the Lebanese armed forces, has not immediately commented on the ceasefire. Meanwhile, moments after the ceasefire was announced, Israel struck a Hezbollah missile launcher. The Israeli army released footage showing what it said was strikes on rocket launchers at a Hezbollah military site in southern Lebanon.
Tensions in the Strait of Hormuz are escalating as both the US and Iran seize commercial vessels at sea. On Thursday, US President Donald Trump told reporters at the White House America will not use nuclear weapons against Iran amid rising military and economic pressure.
US President Donald Trump has reiterated claims that Washington has total control over the Strait of Hormuz as tensions with Iran continue to escalate. Speaking on Thursday, Trump said the United States was enforcing an airtight blockade and could reopen the strait at its discretion, but added he was deliberately keeping it closed to increase pressure on Tehran. He also said Washington would not use nuclear weapons against Iran.
Why would I use a nuclear weapon when we've totally, in a very conventional way, decimated them without it? No, I wouldn't use it. A nuclear weapon should never be allowed to be used by anybody.
At the same time, incidents at sea underscore ongoing challenges on both sides. Iranian forces have seized 2 commercial vessels using fast boats, highlighting their continued operational presence. Meanwhile, US forces boarded a stateless tanker, the Majestic X, in the Indian Ocean, which the Pentagon said was carrying Iranian oil. The situation has led to parallel efforts to restrict maritime traffic, keeping oil prices near $100 a barrel and raising supply concerns. Despite US claims that Iran's conventional forces have been weakened, analysts say it still retains fast boats, drones and mines capable of disrupting shipping. The Strait of Hormuz remains a vital route for global energy flows, and continued disruptions carry broader economic risks. Diplomatic efforts have yet to yield a breakthrough, with both sides maintaining pressure while signalling openness to negotiations.
Staying on the US, it's drawing a line between politics and sport as it prepares to host the 2026 World Cup. While Iran's team is still expected to compete, broader tensions are shaping the conditions around participation after US Special Envoy Paolo Zampoli suggested Italy could possibly take Iran's place. Here's more.
The United States says it has no objection to Iranian players competing in the 2026 FIFA World Cup, despite ongoing tensions between Washington and Tehran. President Donald Trump stated that the administration does not seek to interfere with athletes participating in the tournament. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also confirmed that Washington has not blocked Iran's participation. However, he added that individuals linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard would not be permitted to travel with the team.
I mean, the problem with Iran, it would be not their athletes. It would be some of the other people that would want to bring with them, some of whom have ties to the IRGC. We may not be able to let them in, but not the athletes themselves. But no one's, I don't know where that's coming from, other than speculation that Iran may decide not to come and then Italy would fill their spot. But that's, if they decide not to come on their own, it's because they decided not to come. What they can't bring is a bunch of IRGC terrorists into our country and pretend that they're, journalists and athletic trainers.
The 2026 FIFA World Cup will begin on June 11th and will be hosted by the United States, Mexico, and Canada. After the start of the Iran conflict, Tehran asked for its group matches to be moved from the United States to Mexico, but that request was rejected. Meanwhile, a suggestion that Italy could replace Iran has drawn strong criticism. The idea was raised by U.S. envoy Paolo Zampoli, who said Italy deserved a place. Italy's sports minister, Andrea Abodi, rejected the proposal as not appropriate, saying qualification must be fair. Italy's finance minister also condemned the idea, calling any such swap shameful and rejecting the suggestion of a last-minute place for the national team.
A distant conflict in relation to what's going on in the Middle East is now showing up in UK grocery bills. Rising energy costs linked to tensions are pushing food prices higher. Our correspondent Zainab Fridze has more.
The Middle East conflict is now hitting UK households in a more indirect way through the cost of food. Rising energy prices linked to the war involving Iran are pushing up costs across the food supply chain, and businesses warn consumers are already starting to feel the impact. One of the UK's biggest supermarket groups says higher energy bills are feeding through from farms and factories to supermarket shelves, increasing pressure on grocery prices. Its chief executive is now calling on the government to step in and support the sector, arguing that controlling energy costs is key to keeping food prices down. UK food supply chains rely heavily on energy at every stage, from production to transport and storage, meaning rising global prices are quickly passed on to consumers. UK markets are particularly exposed to the shock, with the conflict driving up oil and gas prices and adding to wider inflation pressures. And those pressures are already visible. Food inflation reached 3.7% in March, with warnings it could rise significantly further by the end of the year if energy costs remain high. Businesses say there is only so much they can absorb before passing costs on. So while the conflict may feel distant, its economic impact is becoming much closer to home, showing up not just at petrol stations, but in the weekly shop. And unless energy markets stabilize, economists warn the squeeze on household budgets is likely to intensify in the months ahead. Zainab Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
EU leaders have used their Cyprus meeting to send a strong signal of support to Ukraine. The bloc approved a major financial package and reaffirmed political backing for Kyiv. Here's more.
European Union leaders gathered in Cyprus on Thursday for an informal two-day summit focused on Ukraine, the Middle East, and EU finances. On the sidelines, the EU formally approved a €90 billion loan package for Ukraine, alongside new sanctions on Russia. The funding is expected to cover about 2/3 of Ukraine's financial needs over the next 2 years. Economists had warned Kyiv could run out of money by June without this support.
We have a strong and fundamental decision, and it's a decision of all the leaders, of the unanimity of EU. We are very thankful. The great progress today, 90 billion support package and sanctions package, which is also a great signal. And we will work to make sure the funds are delivered as soon as possible. For us, it's important, and this will strengthen, of course, first of all, our army, Ukrainian forces, and allow us to boost production by air defense and work more to protect our energy system for the winter.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen confirmed the EU had delivered on its promise during talks in Ayia Napa.
Most of the preparatory work has already been done to implement the €90 billion loan. I think that it is possible to have the first tranche of the 45 billion that are assigned for the year 2026 still this quarter. We have agreed on 1/3 of the loan goes to budgetary means and 2/3 of the loan go into defense. And I think the first package will be a drones package, drones from Ukraine for Ukraine.
Zelensky added that Ukraine is ready to move forward with EU accession talks, saying both sides are prepared to open negotiation clusters. Leaders will continue discussions on Friday, including talks with regional partners on the Middle East and energy security. No formal decisions are expected from the summit itself.
US President Donald Trump has told reporters that it would be helpful if Russian President Vladimir Putin attended the G20 meeting in Miami later this year, but said he had some doubts to that particular request. Here's what he had to say.
In Miami, is that the case?
No, but if he came, it would be probably very helpful. You know, I've said a long time ago, when they made the G8, the G7, they threw Russia out before my time. That was Obama. I'm of the opinion that you talk to everybody. I'm not one of these guys who say, oh, let's not talk to him. You know, there's a war going on. Let's not talk to him.
Now we're going to take a quick break. When I return, I'll be joined by a special guest to go through some of the key stories, especially our top story in relation to Iran and the US. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. Now let's turn to our top story in regards to what's going on with Iran and the US. And the US President Donald Trump has said again that America has total control over the Strait of Hormuz, adding that Iran's leadership was so hobbled by infighting that it was unclear who was in charge. However, Iran has said that Iran's state institutions continue to act with unity, purpose and discipline. Here with me now to dig further into this is Jason Isaacson, Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer of American Jewish Committee. Welcome to the program this morning.
Thank you, Nadia. Good to be here.
Good to have you. My first question in all of this, we know this has been going, I think the war in Iran is now entering into its 8th week.
Yes.
Almost. So much has happened since it first started. But what do you make of Trump's claim in regards to the US taking control of Hormuz right now and its Navy's tactic to block Iranian ports? Is that working?
I mean, clearly, the United States has a great deal of control in the Arabian Gulf, and it is blocking exports and imports to and from Iran. What it is not able to do is to assure safe passage through that vital maritime route. But it has enormous military capabilities. It has just positioned another aircraft carrier in the region. It now has 3 aircraft carrier battle groups, enormous military assets, and it is able to further enforce its efforts to blockade Iran. But the assurance of safe passage is a big issue, and of course the Iranians can exert a great deal of control over that because they don't need to have an entire army deployed. All they need to do is occasionally board a ship or occasionally fire at a ship in order to scare away insurance carriers and shippers. So we're kind of at a bit of a standoff. I've heard some analysts describe it as a game of chicken between the United States and Iran. I think the United States has the upper hand, but it's a complicated dynamic.
It is very complicated. Everyone's very much watching what steps are next. Obviously, on Wednesday was when the ceasefire should have ended, but Trump decided to extend that in order to get Iran to come to the table. But let's just go back a little bit. Let's look at exactly the reasons why the US decided to go ahead and attack Iran, and that's because of its regime change and nuclear weapons facilities, wanting to make sure that it stopped all of that. Do you think the US is still very much that's its goal in making sure that Iran does have a regime change, and also the nuclear weapons, which seems to be a touchy subject anyway, because Iran says it's not something that they're happy to lay down?
I'm so glad you're going there, because frankly, so much of the conversation over the last couple of weeks, especially the last few days, has been over the Strait of Hormuz. Is it open? Is it not open? Who's controlling it? Who's not controlling it? A ship has been seized. A ship has been fired on, when we really should be talking about the reason that we got into this in the first place. Iran has been at war with the United States for 47 years. Death to America has been chanted repeatedly for that 47 years history. And they have rivers of American blood on their hands. So at some point there needed to be a confrontation. There needed to be an effort to reduce the Iranian ability to threaten its neighbors, to threaten the United States and our allies and interests. What has to happen now is to return to the reasons why this war began in the first place on February 28th, this current phase of this conflict that's been going on for decades. Iran must not possess the capability to threaten its neighbors. It must not possess the ability to advance a military nuclear program. They were marching forward on that. They were obviously set back significantly last June in the attacks that the United States and Israel conducted. But they were intent on pursuing this military capability campaign that they've been on for decades. Until that is really addressed, until the 970 pounds of highly enriched uranium is seized and removed from Iran, until the proxies that Iran supports, the terrorist proxies around the region that have destabilized or attempted to destabilize the region, until that funding, that arming, that whole campaign is ended and Iran returns to a normal country, a normal neighbor, I don't know how we're going to come out of this conflict. Those things have to be accomplished. Military capability of Iran, nuclear military capability, support for terrorist proxies, and then let's hope that the Iranian people will be relieved of the suffering that they have experienced, the repression they've experienced for the 47 years of the revolutionary regime.
Well, that's the thing. It's quite a complex turn in relation to what the US wants, especially when it comes to its nuclear program with Iran and what Iran is pushing back on, because they would argue that they're not trying to harm its neighbors. They want this for its own program, for its own enrichment, but its neighbors and the US are saying, no, this is something completely different.
But it's nonsense. It's obvious nonsense. You don't enrich to 60% for civilian purposes. You need 2 or 3 or 4 or 5%. The only reason they were doing that was to be on the threshold of military nuclear capability. And we know from the materials, the documents that were seized years ago, you'll recall, by Israeli forces, in a very successful secret operation, they had plans in place years ago to develop a nuclear weapons program. The threat that Iran has consistently posed to its neighbors through its terrorist proxies, through its attempts to subvert countries across the Arabian Gulf are well documented. And so all that the world should want and the neighbors should insist on is a normal country with a normal regime that's dedicated to the advancement of the well-being of its own people, not to the destabilization of the region and the spreading of its radical propaganda across the region.
Well, then let's talk about the mediation efforts in all of this. Pakistan has already stepped up. It's been hosting the first talks between the US and Iran to get them to the table, which has been seen as a major accomplishment. Now, a second round of talks has not happened as much as it was being advertised that US Vice President was supposed to come, J.D. Vance supposed to come to Islamabad, but that was halted for a period of time. What now happens in regards to the mediating attempts, and what can other countries do? Because everybody is now feeling the global impact of the Strait of Hormuz being closed for a moment. Trump is trying his best. The US is putting pressure on Iran right now in regards to that. Can Pakistan or another country come in and really bring these two sides together?
I'm hopeful. I don't know how we are able to resolve this problem through military means alone. There will have to be a diplomatic settlement, and that diplomatic settlement will rely on several things, including the maintenance of military pressure, certainly, but also I hope, the pressure exerted by neighbors, the pressure exerted by Iran's customers in China, especially of oil, the fact that they're not able to access the oil that that country needs, I hope will allow them to, will inspire them to exert real pressure on Iran to come back to the table, to come up with a reasonable settlement to this problem, a reasonable settlement that will not be splitting the difference between a military nuclear program and the absence of a nuclear program, but something that actually is essentially what the United States has offered. We will treat you like a normal country if you no longer have a military nuclear program, if you no longer enrich on your soil, if the 970 pounds of highly enriched uranium are removed from your country. I'm hoping that China, perhaps Russia, perhaps other countries that have a stake in the transit of oil and other goods through the Strait of Hormuz, that have a stake in stability in the region, will exert the kind of pressure that's necessary.
And with all of this might be quite different in the sense of, I don't know whether or not this is what the US was expecting. Do you think they might have underestimated Iran's resilience or military capabilities in regards to this? Because we are going into the 8th week right now. When it came to Venezuela and capturing Maduro, it was very quick, very swift, in and out. It was very impressive. However, when it comes to the Middle East, I think the US has definitely faced a different type of battle. Would you agree, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's hard to argue that this has been smooth, but no one should have expected it to be smooth. Iran is a country of more than 90 million people that has been developing weapons for decades. I'm sorry that my watch keeps banging on the table. It has a large force that is capable of wreaking havoc and sustaining suffering for a long time. It proved years ago in the war with Iraq that it could suffer 500,000 casualties for an 8-year conflict that ended in a stalemate. It is capable of that kind of resilience, and I don't think that was underestimated. People who were conducting the exercises that led up to this campaign understood that this was going to be a complicated effort. Maybe, from a politician's perspective, we want something quick and easy. I think from a military planner's perspective, it was very clear that this was going to be a complicated endeavor.
Definitely, and just bringing this all together now, kind of like focusing on my last question, it's just not Iran and the US. They also have Lebanon and what Israel is doing in relation to Hezbollah there. This is a joint military attack in regards to really cleaning up what they will consider bad terrorist groups within the Middle East. What is the overall strategy in regards to Israel also coming in with the US in order to make sure that their goals are also realized, as well as what is happening in the US?
That's an important question. Of course, you know that the efforts that the United States has undertaken to bring the people of Lebanon and the people of Israel to a point where they can actually have discussions, where they can actually talk about a future together, where they can actually talk about peace. It's a remarkable historic breakthrough. I applaud the efforts of President Trump and his administration to try to do that. There is an issue, though. It's not a problem between the state of Lebanon and the state of Israel. It's a problem between Israel and Hezbollah, a terrorist army that is occupying Lebanon, essentially. And the Lebanese armed forces have tried, but have not been successful in completing the task of disarming Hezbollah. In fact, it's been a very difficult process. They need help. The United States needs to play a stronger role, I believe, in supporting the Lebanese armed forces. We need to see not only the capability, but the will of the Lebanese armed forces to actually confront Hezbollah. We heard a message the other day from a senior Lebanese leader that they're not interested in confronting Hezbollah. They want to find a way to disarm Hezbollah without confronting them. I don't know how that works with a terrorist army that is so capable and has caused such damage to the Lebanese economy, the Lebanese people, and of course to their neighbor in Israel. So I'm hopeful that with strong U.S. efforts, strong U.S. support, to give the greater, to reward the Lebanese political structures that are trying to change the future of that country and make for a peaceful relationship with Israel, and to remove the stranglehold that Hezbollah, Iran's proxy, has on Lebanon, on the future of Lebanon. I'm hopeful that these efforts by the United States can be successful with the support of a new, much more enlightened, much more progressive leadership in Lebanon, and with Israel's support. Israel does not have territorial ambitions in Lebanon. It just wants peace. It wants to have its people not suffering attacks from the Hezbollah militia that has been attacking them for years.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning, Mr. Isaacson. I could talk to you forever on this, but I know I have to come to an end. Thank you so much. It's a very interesting time that we're living in, and we're paying very much close attention, especially for this region. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. I'll be back next week, Monday, to talk and go through the latest updates throughout the morning. So make sure you don't go anywhere and stay tuned to A News for further information throughout the day. Take care.